Our text today is read from the second chapter of the letter of St. Paul the Apostle to the Philippians, and beginning with verse 14. Do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Yea, and if I be offered up on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I joy and rejoice with you all. For the same cause also do ye joy and rejoice with me. But I trust in the Lord Jesus to send Timotheus shortly unto you, that I also may be of good comfort when I know your state. For I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state, for all seek their own, not the things which are Jesus Christ. But ye know the proof of him, that as a son with the Father he has served with me in the gospel. Him therefore I hope to send presently, so soon as I shall see how it shall go with me. But I trust in the Lord that I also myself shall come shortly. Yet I suppose it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants. For he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness, because that ye had heard that he had been sick. For indeed he was sick, nigh unto death. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I sent him therefore the more carefully, that when ye see him again ye may rejoice, and that I may be the less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation, because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life, to supply your lack of service toward me. The problem then that existed in the Philippian church, a very kindred problem to the church in the Western world today in the main, was that of self-seeking, bickering, striving for supremacy, competitiveness, every man being self-centered, locked up in his own little world, very interested in what he was doing, not much interested in what others around him were doing, and very disparaging, envious, and negative toward anything that anyone else did. This is a sad state of affairs that it is too often the case for Christian people to be found in. Never should it be so. This is a denial of the faith. It is a denial of the mentality of the whole Christian doctrine. It is a carrying over into the Christian operation of that old nature with all of its ugliness and its vices. And this was the particular burden that the apostle carried for the Philippians. True, the Philippians had a number of things for which they were to be commended. They were insistent upon performing the work. They had a dedication. They were interested in doing things which would be applied toward the gospel and toward the religious work, but it was the way that they were going about it which was wrong, and which the apostle was chiding them for. And so he told them to work out their solutions to their problems by getting together with God and with one another, being sincere, being self-denying, having the proper spirit of humility and interest in the other person, as much interest, yes, in the other person as they had in themselves, and with God's help to work out a solution to these problems, and to be positive, joyful, cooperative. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. You know, this was God's great complaint with the children in the wilderness. He said, because they murmured and they complained, and nothing ever suited them, and everything was always wrong, and always they were whining and complaining. And God said, these people don't know my ways. It's a bunch of self-centered, carnal people looking only for their own way, always complaining, never satisfied, never grateful, never thankful. None of these people shall enter into my rest. This is a serious thing. The commandment is to rejoice in the Lord always, and in everything to give thanks, because this is the will of God concerning you. Now, if we believe in the faith, if we believe in the wisdom and the power of God, and if we believe that we walk by faith and not by sight, and that the church is a cohabitable situation where we mix together and blend together and complement one another, and we have this basic healing and profitable attitude of serving one another and not serving ourselves, then we believe that the will of God will be worked out. And if this is the means for the will of God being done in our midst, then why would we murmur and why would we complain? This is an indication that Christian people do not believe in the goodness and the power of God. They don't believe that Christ is the head of the church and that he is building his church. They walk by sight and seek to serve themselves, a very serious malady among God's people. The apostle called upon them to be blameless and harmless, not to injure and to damage either one another or themselves or the church and its mission and its image in this world. Behave in such a way that you are not worthy of being rebuked, that you don't have things that you need to be chided for and corrected for, and for which the church and others must legitimately criticize you. We are in the midst of a crooked and perverse world. We are supposed to shine as the lights of the world. Part of the witness of the church is the testimony of our lives. We can tell people things, all we want to tell them, but if we don't show them with a life that is devoted to, that is happy with, that is joyful in, and sincerely committed to the precepts which we preach, then we aren't shining as lights in the world. We aren't showing anyone anything worthwhile. We're just a bunch of vain talkers like the religionists of all ages. We must shine as lights in this sense, that we live up to the imperatives, to the precepts which we read in the Scriptures and which we preach to others. Holding forth the word of life. The all-important thing, you see, is the mission of the church. No, the mission of the church is not the most important thing in our relationship with God. It's not the most important thing in the world, but the mission of the church is the reason why the church is still in this world. If you wanted to read in the 3rd chapter of St. Peter's 2nd letter, you would read these words, that the day of the Lord is only being withheld from arriving, because God is long-suffering, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God is giving the church an opportunity to take this word of life to the world around it. The mission of the church, somehow, in some way, every faithful and honorable Christian person must be involved in it. No, we don't have to bow to modernism and to the humanistic tactics of evangelism that are being touted around us, to the things which are highly esteemed in the eyes of men but are abomination in the eyes of the Lord. But on the other hand, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because you see the wrong in that, we must cling to this which we cannot throw away, the mission of the church. We are to be lights in this world in the right way, in the proper way. And if you see the wrong way in which it's trying to be done in many instances, then that means that you have more insight than some others, and so your responsibility is the greater. Holding fast the word of life. Now, inasmuch as this is the mission, the operation, and the work of the church, and inasmuch as Christ has left his church in this world, then that, in a certain sense, is what all Christian leadership is trying to accomplish, to develop mature and godly, honest and integral Christian people who will speak and live the word of life in this world in such a way as it will be a beacon in the darkness to guide wayward and lost souls. And so if that is accomplished, then the leadership of the church is exonerated in its endeavors. The apostle said, in order that I may rejoice in the day of Christ. You see, we get historical and legendary visions of these great holy men of old, and we think of them as heroic and famous figures, and sort of imply the same motives for them that we would have had for ourselves had we been them. But the truth is that this apostle was not interested in himself. He was interested in the church, that I may rejoice that you are behaving in this way. And this, of course, is the legitimate interest of every true Christian leader. But now it wasn't the interest of the leaders in the church at Philippi, and it isn't in so many instances. And so the apostle wants to address this. He said, I want to rejoice because of your faithfulness and your achievement. I don't want to have run in vain, meaning the imagery here of running the race for nothing, laboring in the field for no harvest. My efforts will only be fruitful if you achieve that status and that stature which is right for you and which the church ought to have. This is the desire of legitimate Christian leadership, to see people grow and mature and achieve and have honorable lives. We're not using, if we are legitimate in our ministry, the people and the occasion for an opportunity to move up or to make some comment about ourselves or to gain some fame or notoriety. We are fathers trying to raise the children. This is what the apostle was. This is the example that he gives. And he said, I don't care if my whole life is spent in the struggle of trying to mature you and to help you. You can say, poor old Paul, he had better things to do. He ought to have been able to go on, and here were these people weighting him down and dragging him down and all these needs. He said, I don't care if I'm offered upon the sacrifice and service of your faith. That's what it's all about. But I want you to respond positively to this ministry. I want you to take seriously these words. As he said to the Galatians, my little children whom I travail in birth again until the image of Christ be formed in you. The apostle was by way of saying fathership, and the taking of responsibility is part of it, but we hope that that will be met with an appropriate response so that it won't be a waste of time, so that we won't go through all of this trouble and this agony for nothing. And in that same thought, he said, and he expressed joy. I joy and rejoice for you all and with you all. I'm on your side, and if I give myself and it results in that with you, that's good. And something else I want to say, he said, I trust in the Lord to send Timotheus shortly unto you, that I also may be of good comfort when I know your state. Now, don't make any mistake about it. This comment was directed toward these problems that they were having and how they were going to receive this counsel and what kind of good fruit it was going to bear among them. Are you going to take this well? Are you going to do anything about it? And I am going to send Timothy down there to see that it is done. Why Timothy? For I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state. For all seek their own, not the things which are of Jesus Christ. You know, from time to time, as a student and a teacher of the Bible for many years, I run across things in the Bible that are just startling in their impact and soul-searching statements. And I think that this is, to me, one of the most astounding and revealing statements made in the entire Scriptures. Now, you want to understand that St. Paul traveled in the company of men like Silas and Barnabas, Titus, Mark, Luke, Crescens, and others, you see, notable men in the Christian church. And yet this apostle made this statement. Listen to the shattering impact of this statement. Oh, what a message is here. I have no man who will naturally care for your state, For all seek their own, and not the things that be of Christ. Now, there were some pretty notable ministers in that group of people that St. Paul could say that he had at his disposal, or was a leader with in terms of the ministry. And yet, of all of them, only Timothy really had a heart of compassion and of love and of caring. Only Timothy was a self-denying man who wanted the good of others. Anyone else that he might have sent down there to correct the problems in Philippi, the apostle was fearful, would take the occasion to do something on their own behalf, would take the misfortunes of the Philippian church as an occasion to be a scolder or a chider or something else. Somehow they would work it around to use the opportunity and to seize the opportunity to serve their own selfish ends. Now, this didn't mean that these people were useless. It just meant that they lacked integrity and purity to the extent that Timothy had it when it came to the ministry. And that's perhaps a puzzling and perplexing thought, but I tell you this, in my experiences, 20 years now in the ministry, many are the occasions when one sees ministers working with churches who are immature, who are self-seeking, who are competitive, who are trying to make some big operation come to pass to reflect something about themselves, many times impatient, unkind, uncharitable, quick to jump up and leave and go elsewhere with no concern for what impact it has on the people when it isn't going their way. And Jesus commented on this. He said, you hire somebody to watch the sheep, and you pay them for it, and they're out there with their stick, but then here comes this snarling wolf, and they reason like this, well, these are not my sheep. I'm just a hireling. I'm just making wages. I'm not going to risk my life for these sheep. And he throws down the stick, and away he goes, and the wolf ravages the sheep. And Jesus said, because he's a hireling, and the sheep don't belong to him, and he doesn't really care about the sheep, he just had a job. He was in it for himself, and then when it doesn't go his way, he's gone, you see. And this is what Paul is saying. He's reaffirming about the ministry. Too few have the true spirit of the ministry. Oh, and as it applies to ministers just as to all other Christians in the Christian community and other gifts and callings, Jesus said, narrow is the way that leads unto life, and few there be that find it. And you can apply that principle to anything. You can talk about the salvation of the soul, the deliverance of the life from carnality, from waste, and from death, and you can apply it here. And you can say, as St. Paul said, and as Jesus said before him, there's few who find the true spirit and purpose of the ministry, not to be in it for themselves or their own glory, but for others. Nobody else, he said, but Timothy. What did Timothy do? He naturally cared for them. He didn't go down there to say, now I'm going to show you what I can do. I was just waiting for my opportunity, and I never was recognized for the minister I am and for the things that I've got to say. Now I've got my opportunity, I've got my audience, now I'm going to do it. No, you see, Timothy went in the spirit that Paul sent him. There's Christians down there in trouble. They need some leadership, they need some guidance, they need some help. They need somebody who cares enough about them to be disciplinary, but who loves them enough to be kind. I'm going to go down there and see if I can't help those people. Only Timothy, in all of Paul's experiences, had this spirit. Isn't that a revealing thing? And isn't it a challenging thing to Christian leaders, those who would be leaders today, to search your soul? What is your motive? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it really for the good of others? And Jesus Christ commented on this so many times. He said, the Son of Man did not come to be served. He came to serve. And one time he said to his disciples, he said, I'm going to give you a little problem to think about here. I'm going to ask you a little riddle. Who is it that's the greatest? Is it the man that sits at meat while his servants wait on him? Or is it that servant that's doing the serving? And isn't it a fact that in human society, the great one is the one that's being waited on? Isn't that the way you think? But I want to create a little problem for you here. I want to give you something to think about. I am in this world not as the one who's being served, but the one who's doing the serving. And Jesus said, I want to warn you that there are those first that will be last. Oh, we see in our society everybody crowding in ahead of everybody everywhere, trying to run over each other at stop signs, looking out the window with ugly and murderous looks, and everybody trying to get in front, everybody trying to be the top dog on the heap and the first in the line. And this spirit is settled into Christians and into Christian churches and into ministries. And Jesus said, listen, listen, listen. There are those first that will be last. And if any man would be greatest, let him be the least. And if any man wants to be in the legitimate sense the Lord of all, let him in this present time sincerely, genuinely, from the heart out, without hypocrisy, make himself the servant of all. Oh, if there was ever a time in the history of the church when we need a rebirth in this spirit, it is now. One thinks that the criterion, the motivation for the Christian ministry is so wrong. In today's world, it is hard to imagine how it can be corrected. Now the apostle said, I want to come down there. I'm not really saying to you that I'm just going to send Timothy because I don't want to be bothered, but I can't really do it right now. I hope that shortly I will be able to, but I've got some problems down here in Rome. But I will send Timothy just as soon as I find out what's going to happen here, how it's going to go with me. I need to discover a few more things about what these people have got in mind, because it may be very critical to me to have Timothy here to help me very shortly. But just as soon as I know that I can do it, I will send him. And as soon as I can, shortly, I trust in the Lord that I can come myself. Yet he said, I suppose it is necessary to send you Epaphroditus. What does he mean here? And why does he bring this in? Well, you see, Epaphroditus was one of these people that this kind of a competitive and big deal and sophisticated and high-rolling and supposedly elite church didn't like. Epaphroditus was one of those simple and sincere people, and as it always is the case in churches where selfishness and competitiveness is the order of the day, these people were neglecting their responsibilities to minister, not the least of which was their responsibilities to the Apostle Paul. And he said the whole problem that Epaphroditus had here physical-wise was that he was trying to get down here and do what you people were supposed to be doing for me. Because of the work of Christ, he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life to supply your lack of service toward me. And Epaphroditus was not a sophisticated person. He wasn't one of these intellectually and aesthetically pleasing people, and so the church in Philippi was down on him. Why? Well, because he was a simple man, he was a crude man, also because he was a good man. He was doing what they should have been doing instead of all this competitiveness. And you know, when that happens and people are disgraced by the faithfulness of somebody else, they'll always hate that person and despise him and question their motives and look down on them because of guilt. Because of guilt. They want to impugn the motives of good people so that they themselves can feel exonerated in the wrong thing that they're doing. It's just like the church today, who's giving all this attention to the wrong things to please themselves and to try to serve their own bellies, as Paul said to Titus, and then condemning the servants of the Lord who are doing what they ought to be doing, because that faithfulness on the part of those is condemning them. And so they're chiding them, and the apostle realized that there was animosity in this church toward this good and faithful brother Epaphroditus, who even went to the extent of pleading with the apostle not to tell these people that he was sick, because he didn't want them to worry. And so the apostle Paul said, you need to accept this man back among you. You need to give him the honor that he deserves. One of the things you need down in that church is to have this man come back in here and treat him with some respect and give him some honor, because you've been mistreating this man who's been serving you all the while. For your sakes he did it. For your sakes he did it. He longed after you. He cared for you. He put himself to the hurt to do what you were supposed to do and knew that he was doing it for that reason. And now I want you people in Philippi to receive this man, to respect this man, to honor this man. And I want this breach that is developed in this church as a result of his good ministry repaired. That's part of the need you have to learn to honor and respect the right people for the right things and to quit admiring carnal people for the wrong things. These are all a part of the counsel and the ministry and the necessity that existed in the Philippian situation.